We'll go ahead and get started. We have Dr. Ambrose Carroll who's going to be with us. And thank you, sir, for being here and sharing the information with us. I don't know if you heard the earlier speakers, but it was very comprehensive, looking at the continent, what we must be doing, a little bit of the past, but actually more looking at the future when you're going to have over 2 billion people on the African continent, and that will not be too many decades ahead. So Dr. Carroll, if you want to go ahead and start sharing with us, they already have your bibliography, and quite impressed. And thank you for sharing with us, and I will be keeping a strict time schedule. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here, to be in this dialogue. Did have an opportunity to listen to some of our earlier speakers. But curious if I can share my screen. That could be helpful. Again, I am Pastor Ambrose Carroll. I pastor the church by the side of the road in Berkeley, California, and am the founder of an organization called Green the Church, which is working to be a repository and a catalyst for environmental and sustainability work within faith traditions. Let me see if I'm able to share.
Mary, can we do the screen share, please? Mary? Let me see if we can get that for you.
Fantastic. I'll go
just
through.
Keep speaking, and we'll see if we can get that up for you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So Green the Church has been working with the African American, primarily faith communities nationally, really working not simply on things that we are against, but attempting to work on things that we are for. As you all know, African people throughout the diaspora, not only has our land been used, listening to the conversations earlier about the underdevelopment of Africa, listening to the reality.
Hey, your slides are up, Dr. Carroll.
All right, those are, let me see. Those are actually not my slides.
Oops.
And that's fine.
That's okay. Mary, we got a boo-boo. We'll get them for you.
Yeah. Listen, don't worry about that at all. I'll just take a little bit of your time and tell you our pillars. Again, we are focusing on 3 things. First of all, amplifying what I call, or what is called green theology, really beginning to talk to our congregations about the foundation of how we see ourselves in the world, really beginning to ask poignant questions about not just the context of the Bible or what's in the Bible, but beginning to talk about the overarching context of how the Bible came to be, really looking at African history and understanding our reality before Western slavery, before colonization, and really beginning to work to what Dr. Kinney of the Sam Proctor School of Religion said, really working to decolonize the Black church itself, really beginning to look at ourselves not as captive foe, but as people who have power. And so we are really spending time, even in the United States, looking at, our communities, or communities that have been in areas that have been made to be ghettos in the rural South, where my grandparents in Louisiana grew up and lived in the late 1970s, early 1980s. They were still living in houses without running water, when there were still oil pumps running next door on the land adjacent. And the way that we or our society uses the land and ignores the lives of people has been a constant. And so with Green the Church, we're trying to amplify green theology, a theology that looks back, a theology that attempts to connect with God, a theology that does not see white supremacy as the North Star, and then also beginning to, we're going to amplify green theology, promote sustainable practices, and build power for change. So when we talk about sustainable practices, it is kind of the culmination of what we have together. And so our congregation,
I think that my group is over. I can see it there.
thank you. So our churches are working to really take a toll and account on what we own. We do not own a lot of skyscrapers in downtown areas, but we own a lot of faith buildings. And all of those faith buildings, institutions need to be retrofitted. And so we are taking account of the buildings that we do own. And I don't care if they are storefronts or cathedrals. We are taking account of the land that our churches own and that our communities own throughout the United States of America, and beginning to, talk about things like food sovereignty, beginning to understand food systems, beginning to use our places of worship and our communities as places in the urban environment, reaches out to our Black farmers and make sure that the food that they grow or the cattle that they raise has a place for distribution, really working to revisit and look at just energy efficiency, and noting that just like my grandparents lived below par in terms of what was available, that many of our communities are being left out when it comes to things like energy efficiency, renewable energy, making sure that our children are part of what they call STEAM, science, technology, engineering, agriculture, and mathematics, making sure that the health disparity does not continue to broaden, making sure that our communities, which in the 1970s, when Martin King was marching against and marching and having the Poor People's Campaign, we note that Richard Nixon in the United States of America came and began to build out food subsidies, began to give us food-like substances with a lot of high fructose corn syrup and no health, no healthy food, and so looking at our levels of diabetes, hypertension, asthma rates in our communities, understanding that our communities were posited and put in industrial places where people came in from the suburbs to work, but where all the factories and the toxins were available. And we're beginning to look out at that and make sure that our congregations are speaking out about environmental injustices. And so I'm saying all of this from an African-American context, but understanding that that African Americans are people of the African diaspora. And until we begin to really learn how to trade amongst ourselves, until the pastors, clergies, bishops come together and be able to talk to spiritual leaders on the continent, in the Caribbean, that we will not be what God intended us to be. And so we come into this conversation trying to understand in a real way how we can be helpful, how we can indeed connect, how we can have an understanding of what's moving on the continent, and how we definitely believe that Africa is for the Africans. And for so many years, our people, we are right in the middle, as you all know, not only of COVID-19 and the health divide there, that we are dying more on this continent from that, but also the Black Lives Matter campaign is definitely growing steam. It is a stressful period. It is a period where this morning we've heard there have been 5 African-American men found hanging from trees. And so we are in a very interesting time, but we believe that crucial times like this are times for great innovation. Crucial times like this are times for great movement and for great coming together. And so with that, we are delighted to be on the call. Our last prong, I'll mention again, amplifying green theology, promoting sustainable practices, and building power for political and economic change. That is that after we have began to do these practices, after we have began to understand that African people have been doing more with less for a long time, and that we have a lot to teach in this sector, that there's something about agriculture and something about the land and the planet that we know is spiritual, that we know that God exists in the midst of everything. And that finally we will bring all of those individuals together and build power for economic change. People around here talk about the vote, and I think that voting is necessary, but ultimately we are talking about power. Individuals say, well, you know, Black folks need jobs, Black folks need industry, and we need entrepreneurship. We need to be God-like. We need to be creators. And with that, again, I say good morning. Glad to be on the call and look forward to further dialogue. Thank you.